All right, so it is 12:01. We're going to get going. Welcome, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Marc-André Pigeon, or Marc-André Pigeon, and I'm the director of the Canadian Centre for the Study of Co-operatives. Before we begin today, I want to acknowledge that here in Saskatoon, I'm coming to you from the Treaty 6 territory of the land of the Cree, the Saulteaux, the Dene, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and also the traditional homeland of the Métis. We've had a long and seemingly endless winter, but I am so grateful for that because in these times of climate change, having a good winter is really important for a well-being of all of us on this land. And so as I reflect on this kind of land acknowledgement, I want to also acknowledge that because of the way we've pursued growth, we are reshaping the landscape, this traditional homeland of Indigenous communities here, and we do part of our reconciliation journey has to be around making that better. So just want to kind of say that. It's my pleasure now to introduce our speaker today, and that's Eileen Mary Holowka. I apologize if I got your last name wrong, Eileen. Eileen is a writer, game developer, and community organizer and advocate. They have a PhD in communication studies from Concordia University in Montreal and have published extensively within and outside of academia. Now, the reason Eileen is with us today is Eileen co-founded both Weird Ghost and Baby Ghost with Jennifer Robson Faber. They are members of Gamma Space Collaborative Studio, where they work to make the games industry more sustainable and equitable. And I only recently learned about Baby Ghost, sorry, and they're really cool symbols. When I heard and when I found out about them, I'm like, well, we have to invite them to speak about their work. It's such a cool space. And Eileen's talk today is titled "Using the Cooperative Model to Change the Game in the Creative Industry." And I happen to know a little bit about this from back in my days doing a PhD in communication studies. The creative industry, especially the gaming industry, is a place of precarity and long and hard work. In traditional studios, workers are often seen as disposable, and we've been seeing a lot of that recently. Just between 2022 and 2025, there have been 35,000 layoffs in the gaming industry. And that equates to about 28% of the workforce. And it seems like there's more every day if you're just following the news. And marginalized peoples in that developing community are often the first to go. So creative studios, these places, these gaming industry places are also prone to starting up and then dissolving, but they rarely fail because of their creative work ideas. They fail because of governance issues, conflicts, around governance issues, communication problems, and unsustainable working conditions. I think of these as all governance issues in some way. So for Eileen and Baby Ghosts, they believe that the cooperative structure can help address many of these issues. And of course, the cooperative structure is foundationally a different governance structure. And so it kind of gets to the heart of these challenges in that development industry. So today, Eileen's going to introduce us to their work in building cooperative infrastructure through the Canadian video games industry by providing cooperative education to game developers and how this can be applied to other creative fields. Sorry. Before we turn things over to Eileen, just a word on our co-op conversation series for those of you who aren't familiar. After Eileen's talk, we may or may not have a short conversation. We'll see how Eileen does on the timing of the presentation. But assuming things go well, we might have a short conversation, and then we're going to do a breakout conversation. Eileen has queued up a really fun question for everyone to consider. And when we get to that point, we'll break people out into groups for 10, 12 minutes. And this is a great opportunity for people to connect. Part of the kind of idea behind the co-op conversation is to kind of stitch together these networks, formal and informal, between people who are interested in cooperatives and interested in kind of patterning new ways of being and doing in our society, ways that we desperately need, I think it's fair to say. So we always lose a few people when we do the breakout, but I'd encourage you to stick around. This is where the rubber hits the road, and this is where meaning making really happens. If you're having any kind of technical difficulties over the course of the webinar or now, you can wave to Stan you, or sorry, you can message to Stan you, and Stan will wave to you. And Stan, if you can wave to folks out
Hey,
there.
everyone.
Thanks, Stan, or vocalize a wave. That's good too. We're going to record this session because we always get a bunch of people registering who don't show up because they know they can't show up and they listen to it later. And you may want to listen to it again later too, because I think we're going to have a great substance today. So we will share a link to that talk after we're done. And with that, no more from me. It's all over to you, Eileen. Away you go.
Thank you so much. Great introduction. I think you actually talked about some of the stuff
Oh no.
I start. No, 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 you're good. So I won't repeat it too much, but
Oh no, repeat. Repeat is good. I do it all the time in my classes. Repetition is how we learn. So
that's
do
true.
it.
Thank you so much, Marc-Andre. I'm really excited to be here and to see where the conversation takes us later. But um, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how this intersects with everyone's different work and experience as we talk about this today. So I'll start off by just giving you a little bit of an intro and background to Baby Ghosts. Our mission is to advance cooperative and worker-centric labor models in the Canadian interactive digital arts sector, and we do this through support, research, and community building. We're Canada's only organization focused specifically on cooperative video game studio development, and I think possibly in the world. We mainly work with underrepresented creators, so usually folks who have faced some sort of systemic barriers to getting into the games industry and who are most often left behind. But our focus isn't on teaching people to make games. There's plenty of programs out there that do that. And it's not about helping them get jobs in the industry because, as was prefaced, and I'll explain more later, that's not super viable and it's very precarious. But we actually rather help them build sustainable and worker-led structures. And we do this particularly by supporting them during the early, what we call sort of pre-formation or pre-incorporation phase. And we've been doing this for a while. We've been running our program since 2021. We originally ran it out of our separate business, Weird Ghosts. And then we realized that this was its own thing. It became its own nonprofit in 2023, and we've accomplished some stuff during that time. So we've supported 27 studios across Canada, and we just welcomed in 5 more in our cohort that's starting up next week. And these folks aren't just from Toronto or Vancouver, which are the areas that traditionally get the most games funding support. We've worked with people all across Canada and are have some funding to increase that work this year. The majority of our participants have been Indigenous, Black, people of color, and are gender marginalized, and we've deployed over $500,000 directly to these creators as bursaries. But it's kind of key that we don't just offer money. The sort of key part of the program is workshops and peer support from other people who have been through the program before, and that ongoing like growth of this community of other cooperatives who can cooperate with each other. Alongside this, we've been contributing to research and building a network where games co-ops and creative co-ops can support one another, because we're all better off when we share these resources. And this is a photo of me and some of the teams we've worked with, as well as the organizers of the Alberta version of Baby Ghosts, which started off last year. So why does this matter? I don't think I necessarily really need to convince anyone here about the value of cooperatives, but I do want to contextualize the background a little bit more. This work is timely, and not just because 2025 was the year of cooperatives. The conditions in the creative industries right now have been pushing people towards alternatives, whether they realize that or not. People are fed up, they're burned out, and they're looking for something different. And that creates an opening for models like ours. These industries, games industry, animation, VFX, arts and the culture sector have been unsustainable, inequitable, and inhospitable for a long time. So it's no surprise that we're in a crisis moment and that people are fleeing traumatizing workplaces or leaving the industries because they can't sustain themselves in them. And as Marc-Andre mentioned, there's been over 35,000 layoffs across 4 years in the games industry. Many studio closures, despite the industry making billions of dollars in Canada. And unionization efforts, there's been more and more unionization, but these have also been responded to with union busting or with studio shutdowns, as we saw most recently with Ubisoft Halifax, where 72 people, I believe, lost their jobs when the studio shuttered. In animation and VFX, we've also seen mass layoffs, and in arts and culture, there has been brutal funding cuts and reliance on gig economy and an epidemic of burnout. And so people are looking for alternatives. They're looking for something that is outside of the typical structures that capitalism has told us to expect. Despite what the meme says, things are not fine. In the games industry, traditional structures have done a very poor job at keeping things equitable. So, for example, 74% of workers say there's not equal treatment and opportunity for all in the games industry. And this is true across animation, film, theater, music, you name it. And these, across these creative industries, the structures we've inherited systematically disadvantage certain people. Further, the same logic that drives the layoffs now drive AI adoption, not to help workers, but to replace them or devalue the labor. In the case of artists and programmers and more, to literally steal their labor to lower the company's own expenses. And this has also pushed a lot of people towards alternatives. So the creative industry's logic is failing on its own terms. Businesses that moved fast are shuttering. Workers who gave everything to the family got thrown overboard. And the system built on urgency and hierarchy and extraction is collapsing. And this is grim, but it comes with an opportunity because there's a growing interest in worker-centric models across these industries. Funding bodies are increasingly supporting social enterprises. Since we started our work, the Canadian Media Fund now is much more supportive towards cooperative businesses. And the co-op infrastructure already exists, so we're not recreating the wheel. It just hasn't been applied to these industries yet, or those doors haven't been opened up to people. So what makes creative co-ops unique? They're not just regular co-ops, but for games, art, animation, and art. And they're not just nicer or more ethical studios. They sit at an intersection between these two directions. Traditional co-ops like agriculture, retail, and housing don't deal with the logistics of creative production, and traditional studios have structures that extract value, not share it. So let's look at how 5 ways that the creative co-op model can be different. The first is that the work itself is fundamentally different from traditional co-op sectors. Creative projects have natural endpoints, so you ship a game, you release the film, and this is very different from, say, a retail co-op where operations are continuous. There's rises and falls, but there's sort of an ongoing process. This means that teams in creative industries often expand and contract based on project needs. So you might need 5 people during production and 2 during pre-production. And many co-ops, like retail co-ops, have steady daily operations, whereas creative work has intense periods and calm periods. So the structure needs to account for that variability. The second unique factor is intellectual property. Creative work produces code, art, music, design, all of which is intellectual property. And in a collaborative group, figuring out who owns what can get complicated and messy very quickly. This matters because credit and attribution are how creative workers build their careers. Your portfolio and your credits and your reputation are what get you the next job or the next opportunity. And whereas traditional co-ops deal with physical goods like produce and products, the thing you make there is much more concrete. Creative co-ops deal with ideas, and ideals are very slippery. Who owns a character that three people contributed to? What happens to someone's music if they leave the co-op? In traditional studios, that just belongs to the bosses, essentially, and that credit is not really attributed to anyone. And these are questions that don't have obvious answers, which is why the cooperative model can be so beneficial because it allows you to design this in a way that works for your team. The legal default in Canada and really most places is that whoever creates intellectual property owns it unless a contract says otherwise. So if you're collaborating without agreements, it can end up in a very messy situation. So in a creative co-op, all IP belongs with the cooperative. It's a shared thing, just like the business itself. And if a member leaves, the co-op retains all the assets. And so this means, again, having those clear agreements around credit and attribution, because those are critical things for career building, and royalty structures, if it is applicable, and what happens to works in progress when someone leaves. This is a tension that is different from traditional cooperatives for sure, and really involves that sort of collaborative foundational governance building that is necessary in a creative cooperative. The third way is that, in the industry, crunch is considered just how things work. In a cooperative, we can write anti-crunch policies directly into our governance documents. This table shows the fundamental difference between industry logic and cooperative logic. So in the industry, it's said that deadlines are justified at any cost, but in our cooperatives, we can collectively decide to miss external deadlines if they're not crucial. We can weigh the trade-offs together. I'll talk about this more in a second in an example as well. The industry treats urgency as the default mode. Everything is on fire all the time. Whereas in cooperatives, we reserve urgency for what actually matters, which is supporting our members when they're struggling. And perhaps most importantly, the industry treats our bodies like machines that should be productive constantly, but we're not machines, we're humans. So some weeks, we might give 110%, some weeks we have 60%. This is something that a cooperative can adapt to. As one of the teams that we've supported, worked with, Amalor puts it, when people aren't exhausted and terrified, they make better games. And this applies across creative industries and probably all industries. Rested and supported people do better work. Fourthly, in creative work, there's always tension between creative vision and profit. The industry pushes you to take any product that pays, but in a cooperative, we can write our values into our governance so they actually guide decisions. Again, Amalor, who I talked about, is a great example of this. So they were offered a crypto project, which offered very good money, but they said no because it didn't align with the values that they had decided on as a team. They discussed it as a group, decided together, and turned it down for other projects. This is only possible when you have structures that support values-based decision making and have those values written into your governance. In traditional studios, the boss gets to decide. They might take that project regardless of what the team thinks. Whereas in a co-op, of course, everyone has a voice in those decisions. And we're working generally with pretty small teams of like 10 or less people. So this is something that can be consensus decision making, although it doesn't always have to be consensus. Values aren't just tied to concrete practices, or they're not just nice words. They're the things that actually structure everything that you do. And then finally, the fifth aspect is how creative co-ops approach revenue. Traditional studios often bet everything on one project, so they raise money, they make the thing, hopefully they get funding, but that's very difficult to do in this day and age. If it doesn't hit, it's a failure and they're done. And we've seen this play out over and over again in these industries. You know, a game is not a success, and so the company lays off everyone that they hired to make it in a rush. Creative co-ops can build diversification in from the start. So we've seen our teams mix contract work or services with their original creative projects. They also get grants. They might have other income streams like speaking gigs or teaching or consulting. So Amalur, again, who I've talked about, has a breakdown of roughly 40% service work, 35% game sales, 20% other revenue, and 5% from grants. So there's no single point of failure. If their game sales are slow one quarter, the contract work can carry them. And if the contract dries up, they've got the passive income from this back catalog of sales. And that doesn't mean that they're not committed to their creative vision. It means that they're committed to it in a way that is more sustainable. So the fundamental inversion here is traditional studios cut people to protect their margins, whereas co-ops cut hours to protect people. When the revenue drops at a co-op, the first question isn't like, who shall we lay off? It's how do we adjust to this? What do we need to refine? How can we work differently in this moment? And this is resilience. These governance aspects of creative cooperatives make them much more humane, but that governance does take time to be built. And so this is why I mentioned this earlier. We focus on what we call the pre-formation stage. So we sort of identified these 4 stages of cooperative development. The pre-formation, where you're building your values and your relationships and practicing working together as a team. The formation, where you start doing the legal incorporation, writing your bylaws down based on the other agreements that you've determined. And then early operations, where you start practicing these things. This is like the first 2 years of working together. And that grows into being a mature operating business. So our program is like the very early stage. A team has come together, they've worked together for a little bit, and then we talk to them about the history of cooperatives, cooperative principles, power. We work with them on how to come to a shared purpose and work as a team, decide how they're going to make decisions in different areas. We talk about how to make their values actionable, how to structure their financial situations in equitable ways. And my favorite, we talk a lot about conflict resolution and collective care, having a plan for conflict before it comes up, because it's always going to come up, especially in creative work. So some key things to remember. First, structures shape culture. You can't wish your way to equity. So just saying you're ethical and sustainable doesn't mean you are. Even if you incorporate as a co-op, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing so in a sustainable and ethical way. Most co-ops and collaborative studios fail because of interpersonal and values conflicts, not because they ran out of money or couldn't make good work. So this is why we focus on this pre-formation stage so much. Doing the relational work before you file the paperwork is critical. To recap everything I've said, there's this contrast between the industry logic and the cooperative logic. So in the industry, it's all about moving fast, breaking things, whereas cooperative logic means taking things at the pace that they require. The industry focuses on urgency as the default, whereas cooperative logic focuses on reserving urgency for supporting one another. In the industry, the boss is the ultimate authority on resolving conflict, whereas cooperative logic allows conflict to be processed as information that is resolved as a team. The industry treats workers as disposable, whereas cooperatives allow every member to be invested in collective success. We have profit extraction versus resources flowing directly to contributors and the people who do the work. And rather than having this single point of failure, knowledge doesn't leave when one person does in a cooperative. These roles are shared. They're something that is the ownership of everyone. I put a bunch of resources here that I'm not going to read through entirely, but there's some sort of funding opportunities for cooperatives, some of the readings that we've used for this presentation and for our work. And if Jenny's in the chat, I'll get her to drop in some of our resources, like our tools for budget builders, making operating agreements. We've been building these processes to help people get started. Um, we also have a lot of resources from our program available online, and we are starting a membership program called Ghost Guild that you can sign up for. We'll be slowly introducing people into that. Whoops. Oh my gosh, that's such a fancy slide, but we're not supposed to be there yet. Um, Building alternatives is how we survive to keep creating. So let's build something better with what we've got, which is each other. And now we get the beautiful slide. Thank you so much for having me. I think I was exactly 20 minutes. Do I get a prize?
Gold star. We're sending you a gold star, Eileen. Thank you so much. I was saying to Natalie, I just sent her an email like, we got to get Eileen to write us a case study. Okay, because that was brilliant. Loved it. Thank you so much. I want to jump into the breakout, but I do have a question that's just eating away at me, Eileen. And I'm a Gen Xer of the 80s. I was surfing the pre-web in the 80s with my 300 baud modem. And your ghost character reminds me of all the ASCII art that used to be out there. It was really cool. And then it's also a ghost, so like Pac-Man. And I'm thinking, are there some hints of nostalgia in this, or is there some message from the past that you think is relevant to the conversation you're having today? I can't help but think that. So what are your thoughts on that?
I love this. I've never been asked about this. Our designer for our ghosts was is also Gen X, so I feel like this
Yes.
informed this definitely informed the design. Um, I don't know. There's a really long history of game development. I have been adjacent to, if not directly involved, since the really early game days of indie games, where
Right.
folks who did make projects could have a lot of success really fast because they just
Exactly.
didn't there wasn't other stuff out there, and things
Yeah.
have shifted so much in that time. But also it was really interesting because you know it was it was sort of like the start of film or something like that. There was people just coming together, working together, making things. There
Right.
wasn't any real discussion around being a business at that time because it wasn't really seen as a viable career path. And so you got a lot of people who worked together and then had conflicts and broke up, and a lot of drama around people's ownership and all of these things. And now we've sort of moved to this point where it's uh it's so business focused, but there can be more resources for people knowing how to get started in that area.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's what I was thinking. I mean, that early period of game developing was a bit freewheeling. I remember these startups, Electronic Arts and oh my God, what's it called?
Activism, yeah.
Activism. And, they were like little guys and they were like two people and now they're
Yeah.
monsters, right? And so it does seem like there's a bit of a hint of that in what you're doing. You had a great question for our group breakouts. Can I get that posted into the chat, Stan? There we go. Um, Yeah, I have a bunch of follow-up questions, but I'm going to let people talk and then we'll come back, hear what they say. And if there's dead air, I'll ask you my questions.
Okay,
But
sounds good.
we're going to break out for because Eileen was very punctual. We're going to give everyone 12 generous minutes to have conversations. Please take an opportunity to introduce yourselves. If you don't know each other, tell each other a bit about where you're from, who you are, why you're here. And then, if you have time, hopefully, address Eileen's question. It's a fun one. So, Stan, if you can break us out, please, for the next 12 minutes, that'd be great. I
Okay.
think we're probably all reconvened. I'll just open it up for conversation. If anyone has a question for Eileen or wants to share some of their conversation, please take a moment to do so. You can raise your hand, virtual hand, physical hand, just unmute yourself, whatever. It's all good. We have a small enough crowd, I think we can manage the various forms.
I see Molly has her hand up, then
Oh,
John.
thanks, Stan.
Thanks,
I
Dan.
didn't see that. Okay.
Eileen, thanks for your talk. I run a creative studio, but in design and development for community orgs. And it's really like we're not a cooperative model, which is why this interests me to get a little bit of insights. But doing business differently is certainly an interest. I'm curious about the practicalities. Like that to me is still really this like kind of these unknown pieces. And when you mentioned just the piece about that when people aren't exhausted and terrified, they do better work. Like that's so it's so resonant. But I'm curious, like, what does that look like in a cooperative when there's deadlines, when people are off sick and they need to rest, with all of these other competing demands? And then kind of a secondary, perhaps connected question around like because most of our work is client facing rather than internal, how do you bring a client along who perhaps isn't in that kind of mind space of an anti-capitalist approach to work?
Yeah, those are both really great questions. One of the things we were talking about in our breakout group was around this governance, basically. Let me back up, actually. What we always start with when we work with teams is their values and then making their values into actual practical things that they're doing and their governance decisions. So if you find in a team that everyone is burning out, you need to go back and revise and figure out what's going on. Like maybe you've taken on a bunch of different grants because you were offered all of them, but it's not actually sustainable or feasible for everyone to do that. And that's something that as a team would align with the values that you described amongst yourselves. It's really important to understand what everyone's actual capacity is, and it's really important that people understand what each other's roles are so that if someone has to step back, there's someone else who can step into that role. Another thing that we talk about a lot is what's the word? Um, Role sharing. I can't think of the phrase that I'm thinking of. Shadowing one another, um, having it so that not one person is always the one leading the meeting, that you're sharing these sorts of things so that you're like undoing implicit bias. Um, and in terms of bringing a client along, I think again, it's having these things written out really clearly in advance so that you can propose a fair amount of compensation from the client and a fair timeline that allows for you to have that wiggle room. And I know that's always going to be like a little interesting to juggle, but the more you like have that understanding of a team of what your actual capacity is, what you can actually do, the better that you can propose that to someone else. And usually folks are on board within reason. This is a bigger question, though. I feel like we could talk about this for a lot longer, so I hope that's a good start.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Eileen. John, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
So this is partly influenced by breakout group with Moses and Kim and some of the interesting discussion from my perspective we had. Eileen, do residuals ever factor in as part of when someone leaves the co-op, they leave, but is there ever that notion of residuals for those who have left but made a major contribution while they were there?
Yes, this is also something that people can decide how they want to do this within a cooperative, but often with games or creative projects, like you have profit sharing, so anyone who's contributed to the project will still get some percentage of the profits. It's up to the co-op to decide how much is going back into the co-op and what is going to the contributors. Uh, so it's interesting because in games you don't tend to have residuals the way you do like a TV show where the actors are getting paid out for long periods of time. You just get paid up front and then the IP all belongs to the company. But this is something that teams can decide to do however they seem works best for them. And it's really important that you have that decided on ahead of time. So if someone's planning on leaving, there's some sort of protection for them or a fair contribution.
They know what they've signed up for
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
beginning. No, it's been an incredible presentation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much.
Right, let's see. Anyone else want to chime in here? Maybe I'll just build while people are thinking about whether they want to pose a question or not. Eileen, are these co-ops largely like worker co-ops, like employee-owned co-ops? Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
Okay, right. It'd be hard to imagine them any other way, but I was just curious about that because that's where that residual and all that piece comes up, and that's really meaningful. I see Murray. It looks like you've unmuted yourself. If you have and want to ask a question,
Well,
please
I'd
do.
like to just address Kay because she talked about social caregiver support. And I'm with the Saskatoon Council on Aging. With the changing demographics and with the privatization of services for seniors, I'm very interested in how you can evolve these caregiver co-ops to support the seniors as they need the because we're entering an era where people need medical services and support for 7 years before they die. And during that period of time, caregiving is an important component. So, how do we develop the private structure to support the changes that occur in our demographic? And I was addressing that to Kay, but anyway, it's just throwing it forward, showing the need for development of these types of co-ops and the services.
Absolutely. Go
I
ahead.
can just give
Sorry.
you one hint if you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Go
There
ahead,
is
Kay.
actually a worker co-op care. It's almost like a federation, and if you contact me, I can put my email into the chat and we can chat further.
Okay.
Fantastic. Yes, that would be great. I believe there's been some case study work done on those co-ops. Some of them are in Ontario, I believe, Kay. I might be wrong about this, but they had very different outcomes in the COVID epidemic than the non-co-op
Yeah. And
seniors
we did
care.
do a case study on them, so yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I vaguely
Yeah.
recall seeing
So I'll
something
put
about
my
that.
email in the chat, just
Eileen, I
my
don't
website.
imagine you. Oh, thanks, Kay. I don't imagine you have much to say on that, but if you do, put it out there.
I wish I did. It sounds really important, and I'd love to know more about it, but I don't know more about it right now.
No, fair enough. And Kay's going to put some information in the chat, contact information, and Kay, if you have a link to that case study, that would be great. There's a question here from Melanie on Melanie Hicks on finding support for co-op type, I guess, development work in Ontario. I'll Eileen, I don't know if that's directed at your area necessarily, but I'll let you take a crack at it, and then I can throw some things on the table after. Go ahead.
Yes, I do have some info here. I'm just copy it over. Um, we also have been in, like, there's the Ontario Cooperative Association,
Right.
and they're really great. Um, Co-op Zone has some training programs. The Canadian Worker Cooperative
Federation.
Federation, of
Yeah.
course, has workshops. And then
Yes.
there's the cooperators do some have a development program grants. some things you can look into a little bit more. Yeah, I
That's
think that's
great.
everything.
Eileen, you said everything I would have said, so
Okay,
I had
awesome.
nothing to add. If you were in Manitoba and anywhere west of there, I would say it's the cooperatives first. I mean, they still have resources that you can explore. It's just that their development work is oriented from Manitoba westward. But they have a lot of resources on their website. Like you can take a basic Co-ops 101 course that's really fun and engaging, and you might even see me in it a few times. And other kind of easy to work with material. They just can't help you get the thing off the ground because it's out of their jurisdiction. So that's another source. Stan will probably pop that into chat if he hasn't already. Oh yeah, big long
What
link.
a link.
Something went wrong there. Anyway, Eileen, one thing that in my breakout conversation, I want to pick up on a thread you just kind of mentioned in passing, which is this AI business. Um, how does that shake out? I mean, obviously, there's an existential threat in a sense, or at least there's the perception there's an existential threat to the developers. But within the co-op, how does that potentially cause issues? Maybe you have some people who are really for integrating an AI tool into their coding work, and others who are like, no, never. And like, how does that shake out? What have you seen in that space?
Yeah, that's one of those like key values conflict areas, I think. I'd say like all of the teams that we tend to work with tend to be very anti-generative AI, but
Okay,
it's also like AI has been a part of game development for a long time. It's how you
sure,
program your enemies and your characters. Um, Artificial intelligence itself um, is not like a problem. But I think most artists and programmers we're working with who are focused on these like cooperative futures in addressing climate change and in being more ethical do have a values conflict with like the very extractive generative AI
right.
stuff.
And what about your clients? I mean, I'm really curious about how they're kind of approaching that. Do they kind of expect you to be faster because you can use these tools, or like what's that conversation look like?
I mean, what I've heard from a lot of people in not just this industry, but also like copy editors and writers, is that a
Yeah,
lot of folks are expecting people to use AI tools, but it's making more work for them. So
right,
it's not really making anything faster. I don't know, we're in a really strange moment where I feel like there's a push, there's a lot of funding towards AI. There's a lot of like interest in it from this like higher up level, but it's creating a lot of challenges and confusion for a lot of people. I
right,
mean, obviously having like something transcribed by AI can be really beneficial. It's not like there's not benefits there, but I think we're like really figuring out where that's actually helpful and where it's just creating more labor for people.
right, right.
Or
Uh,
teachers who are marking
oh my gosh,
papers written
yeah.
by AI and spending all of their time filing
Checking.
those things. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a subject for a different conversation, but
Yeah.
I could go on about that. Any last questions? I seem to have lost my ability to see everybody, so very strange. Stan, if you see a hand up, please let me know, but we're going to take one quick question if there is one outstanding. Otherwise, we're just about at the hour. You see anything, Stan? It's the strangest thing.
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, this has been such a great conversation, Eileen. Thank you so much. This is a really
Thank you.
powerful message. Thank you to everyone for attending this co-op conversation. Like I said earlier, we'll be sending the recording out soon. I do want to flag before you run off. We have our last co-op conversation of the season, which is the academic year, basically, in May, always the first Wednesday of every month, for those of you who are new to this. Um, every month up till May, so September to May. And our next one is we're going out in style because I think we have another fantastic conversation lined up. This is with the people who run, excuse me, a co-op called les Valoristes, Coopérative de Solidarité. It's a um, it's a cooperative of waste pickers, people who pick up bottles and other things and bring them back for recycling. Talk about marginalized people. This co-op is working directly with those people. And the woman who's going to speak to us about this, Marica Vasquez Tagliero, is absolutely powerful and engaging, and you're going to love it. So, really looking forward to that conversation. That's on May 6th. And ahead of that, on April 22nd, we're going to have another webinar. This is not part of our co-op conversation, but we're going to have Charlie Graves talk to us about a survey that we helped commission with Dion Poehler, then the Cooperative Research Retail Chair in Cooperative Governance back last spring, on how Canadians feel and perceive cooperatives. So we're going to share results from that survey a little bit later, but still timely. And then finally, we have an exhibit, a museum exhibit here at the Diefenbaker Canada Centre, and it's called Community Power: Celebrating Canadian Cooperatives. The exhibit was kind of spooled up last fall, as part of the International Year of the Cooperative, and it's winding down later this month. So if you haven't had a chance, and you're in Saskatoon, come and check it out. But we also have an online version of the exhibit that you can visit, and Stan's going to post that link in the Zoom. It's also on our website. You can access it that way. But yeah, if you want to kind of situate the cooperative sector in some kind of broader context, this is a great place to start. And I think, as Eileen was saying, I don't know if it was before the conversation formally got going or after, but it's very Western Canadian. We have a lot of Western Canadian stuff going on in that. So I think you'll get something out of it. So with that, I want to thank you again for spending some time with us today. All these links are in the chat. Have a great rest of your day, and hopefully we'll connect soon. Take care, everyone.